Peace and blessings, family. How are you doing? I'm very excited to be on. Got a guest tonight, and I'm very happy to be talking to this sister. This sister is running for the school board here in Sacramento for the Sacramento City Unified School District Board. And so we want to get his sister our support, Sister Cecile Nunley.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So this is what I want to ask you.
Okay.
Why are you choosing to run for the school board?
You know, I went back and forth on it. It's a complicated answer, of course. Okay. It started, I have worked for school districts for, over 10 years. I can't even remember the number of years. But I've been in education over 24 years in total. And I've seen good boards, I've seen bad boards, I've seen districts that were effective or that truly cared, and then I've seen some that were just flat out dysfunctional. And I left a district that ended up being very dysfunctional, and it was hurting our children, and I couldn't take that anymore. So I retired, and then I came here, and I went to the town hall. Sac City had a town hall in August, last year. It was either July or August with the new superintendent. And I was shocked because one of the parents got up and was speaking, and she was speaking in Spanish, and so she had an interpreter, and she said, you know, one of the teachers told my son, oh, you don't have to come to school anymore. Why don't you just stay home? And she kind of was shocked by that. And I was so shocked, I kind of physically moved, and the parents around me said, that happens all the time, Cecile. I kind of went, what? I had never heard of that, and that let me know there's a huge need in this community, and that was concerning to me. So that started my journey as to some of the reasons why, and then I went back and forth. Do I really want to do this? Is it going to be wise to do this? My area is predominantly Caucasian, so it was like, oh, are you sure you want to do this? And the other thing, I started attending board meetings. And all of the board meetings, as you well know, I believe there are 5. There are 7 board members. One is Asian, one is, I believe, Hmong, and then the rest are all Caucasian. So there's no representation of us on our board at all.
Wow.
And then as things kept going, the one issue that became so pressing was the budget. And that one, even though there are other issues that we have to discuss with, and we'll get to those, I know, in a few minutes, with regards to African Americans in particular, but the budget right now for the school district has been rejected by the County Office of Ed. And what that means is that for this year, we're starting to lose local control. The district will no longer be able to say what it wants to do. It's going to have somebody else tell us what we have to do. Because right now, the county appointed a fiscal advisor over the district. Not the district went out and hired somebody. The county said, no, here's a person. You're going to have this person. And it started out that the budget, there were plug numbers in the budget, basically. They just took this budget and said, oh, we'll just plug a number here and we'll plug a number there. And that started the problems, and that's why the county rejected it. Now we have a revised budget that looks a little bit better that's coming up this Thursday for the district to vote on, but it has deficit spending of like 34 million, 41 million, $47 million. It's projecting that the district will run out of money next year. And once the district runs out of money, then it would be a state loan, and the state administrator comes in and takes over the district. So that is huge, huge, if that should happen. They need to start trying to figure out how to make that not happen now. You can imagine, and I can imagine, if you're living at home and mom or dad loses their job, what type of impact does that have on you? Imagine for a whole district. The morale of the employees, everything goes down.
Rebecca Pearson is asking, what area? Area 2?
Area 2. I'm in Area 2. Over in East Sacramento area, goes all the way to, I believe it's Power Inn Road. And down to 22nd Street.
Okay, okay. So with that being said, what does a board member do?
The major functions of a board member, there's about 3 or 4 areas. One of them is they hire the superintendent, so that's been done.
Okay.
Number 2, by state law, they have to approve a budget, which since their budget got rejected, that's pretty bad. And number 3, they're supposed to approve all contracts, which that's another area that's an issue with Sac City. Recently in August, the SAC-B reported that the school district had this contract and they paid out $5.2 million and received nothing for it. Yes, you heard me correctly. It's in the SAC-B article, August 9th. They paid a technology firm $5.2 million, and they're trying to sue to get their money back.
What were they paying them for testing, for?
It was for technology. They were supposed to implement this new technology system, I believe, for the finance, and it did not work. It failed. There had to have been a manager signing off somewhere as the invoices came in to say, okay to pay, and they were just paying out the money. And it's like, why were you paying if you're not getting anything? So that is a huge, huge issue. I think there's some major problems, and especially since the board is supposed to be approving all contracts and they're supposed to be doing the budgets. So 2 out of those 3 things, I could see that there's a problem on the board right now, which is why I think we need to change board members.
Right on. Has a black woman ever been on Sacramento City Unified School District Board?
Not that I have found. Anyone that I've talked to, and I haven't gone back to really do the research, is from what in everyone's memory, they cannot remember an African-American woman being on the school board. They do remember Rick Jennings being on the school board, but they don't remember an African-American female.
So with that being said, not having any African-American representation on the board, how does that fare for our students?
For our students, again, it's one of those where you want people to be able to look up to those in charge, and hopefully they look like us, and so we can say, well, there's somebody that can relate to me, or there's somebody I can aspire to. But with not having any board members sitting on the dais, if you look at the board meetings when they're being televised, you have the board members sitting up, all on the dais, and then you have staff along the sides. And we do see staff that look like us, but as far as board members sitting up on the dais, no, there's no one that is African American at this point.
So tell me, how are black students doing? How are black male students doing?
Okay, now that goes into the latest, because June 21st board meeting, I'll never forget, this report came out from the state, and I'll share it with you. You can go online. It's called Get Out, if you could show it to everyone. And it's called Get Out. And it was published by 3 authors from, I believe it's UC San Diego, and they did a study of all of the school districts in the state of California. From their published reports, they found out that the county that had the worst African American suspension rates was Sacramento County. And then, out of the districts within Sacramento County, the worst districts was Sacramento City Unified School District. Sacramento City Unified actually suspends, just in total number of students, more African American males than even LA Unified, and LA Unified is 10 times the size of Sac City. They have a population of over 4,500 African American, no, I'm sorry, it's in the 28,000 African American males, whereas we only have like 4,500, and we still spend more in total number than LA Unified School District. So it's a huge, huge problem. And the thing that's most disturbing to me, and I do want to say this, when you talk about kindergarten through 3rd grade, the African American males are being suspended 10 times the rate of white males. 10 times, and they're not even in double digits. I mean, these are kids that are not even 10 years old. They're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. and they're being suspended 10 times the rate of the white students. And those are just the ones we know about. So, I'm sorry.
So what, no, and looking at that report, what was the board, Sacramento Unified School District's board saying about this report?
Yeah, they were saying that they wanted to do professional development for their staff as far as cultural sensitivities, unconscious bias, but they only had about $300,000 set aside for that. And the total, if they were to implement it for every single teacher, it would be over $1 million. Now, they did say about cost, but here's the thing. If Sacramento City Unified suspends more students than any other district in the state, and it is the worst of all the districts in the state, and the number of districts in the state is 1,026. If they are number 1,026, you can't get any lower. When is it going to be bad enough that you say, now we got to spend the money? When are things so bad that you say, that's enough? We need to do better. And that becomes concerning. I'd also like to point out, and I hope you could share this one as well. This one is the report that they actually held a town hall at McClatchy High School. And it's called the Capital of Suspensions, and it talks specifically about Sac City Unified and the suspension rates for African American males. Now, on June 21st, when these reports first came out, there was about 20 of us that got up to the podium and spoke and said, this is a problem, you need to do something, what's going on, board, what are you gonna do, what are you gonna do, what are you gonna do? And the board at that time, they took it, and so they have, I believe the board has gone through training on cultural bias as well as some other things, but they held a town hall, and they have now formed the African American Task Force, which that African American Task Force, I do want to say, is being held on Tuesday nights from 6 to 8. So right now it is going on at the school district office on 47th Street.
Okay, so what happens at those meetings? Like, what does the task force do?
What the task force is supposed to do is come up with recommendations as far as what can be done to turn the tide on this, to make changes so that our students aren't being suspended so much. Whether it's just the teacher saying, you know, you have 2 kids, and they've shown evidence on this when they've done the research. 2 kids, one white, one black, they're both talking and disturbing the classroom. The white child will get, oh, just stop, whereas the African American child, oh, you need to be suspended, you need to shut up, you need to go somewhere, you know. So for that, we need to change how it's done.
Right.
Okay? And like I said, the fact that it's so early, K through 3, and you're suspending the kids.
Right.
And then the other thing that I do want to talk about, because it needs to be addressed, is what they call soft suspensions. And I have been talking about soft suspensions. Now, what does that mean?
Right.
Well, that is when, let's say, the child, willful defiance or whatever, and technically they may meet the minor qualifications for being suspended. And principals or whatever are thinking that they're helping the child, and so they will say, why don't you just stay home for a bit instead of suspending you? So it doesn't go on their record that they were suspended, but it's exclusionary. If the child is not in school, how are they learning?
Right on.
And so if you just encourage them to voluntarily stay at home, it's still the same effect. That child is not in school, he's not getting instruction.
Right.
And so that becomes problematic, the soft suspensions as well as the regular suspensions. And then I want to talk a little bit about what parents can do, okay? Because that's so important, especially when we're talking about suspensions. And the ACLU has a program, and it's called My School, My Rights. And you can go to myschoolmyrights.com, and it will even give you your rights related to school discipline, okay? So that you can know that if you are going to be suspended, you can request certain things as far as No, I want to request a hearing or what have you as to why I'm being suspended, so that parents have rights. Because many times what I hear from parents, and I'm sure you may hear this as well, Rolanda, is they don't know where to go for resources.
Right on.
They need help or they need support, and they don't know where to reach out to. They don't know who to reach out to. I know one resource has been the Black Parallel School Board, and I know you've been a resource as well, and there are others around in our community who are resources, because many parents feel like they're just fighting this all by themselves. And we need to change that as far as, you know, whether it's parent involvement of some type, and advocacy, reach out. Try to connect to others in our community to be sure that, you know, we can get some of those things. And that's one of the things that the task force is supposed to try and do, address some of those, bring those questions up, and hopefully we can start instituting some policies to make some changes on this.
Why do you think that suspension rate is so high?
A lot of it, I do think, is perception on the part of those that are doing the suspending. I think a lot of it is, you know, that whole cultural bias. And because there is no reason why it should be 10 times the rate of others. There's just no reason. And especially when you're talking kindergarten, I mean, some will say, well, what can a kindergartner do? You know, and I know that there are some problem kindergartners, as one person related to me. You know, they could be disturbed or be a victim of trauma themselves, and so they can act up or act out. And so I understand those. But when a lot of it is just like willful defiance, you know, take off your hat or sit down, I don't want to. That results in you being suspended? Well, that's not right.
What is willful defiance? What's that?
You didn't do what I said, basically. You didn't do whatever instruction I gave you to do. That's considered willful defiance. It's very subjective. And as I said, the studies have said that teachers, when they see children, if it's a white child, they have a tendency to go, oh, Johnny, just sit down and be quiet. Whereas when it's an African-American child, they become very upset and think that the child should be expelled or removed from the classroom. So there's that bias. Because one of the things, and I know you and I talked about this, the majority of teachers are female, and the majority of teachers are still white, okay? And white females have a tendency to have this perception of fear when it comes to African-American males. They also have a tendency, and they've shown this in the cultural bias studies, that they will have a tendency to think that a child is older if they're African-American. Like you can have two kids, they can both be 5 years old or 8 years old, and the teacher doesn't know their age, and you just give them a story of, well, the kid swiped some candy, did some little, whatever. And for the white child, they'll think, oh, well, he was so young, he's only 5 or 6 years old. And then for the black child, even though they're only 5 or 6 years old, a lot of times they'll think, oh no, they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, so they should have known better, so let's do harsher punishment for them. And that starts that whole issue of going into the school to prison pipeline, which we need to break that. It is critical that we break that.
What can we expect from you as a candidate that you would do if you get elected to the board?
Okay. Now, relative to this whole budget crisis, that's one whole issue that is going to really take a lot of time. But one of the things that I like in the recommendations for the report that I think is easy and it doesn't cost any money, make it a standing agenda item. What are the suspension rates? Let's look at it every single month or every board meeting. Have it as a standing agenda item. What you measure and what you look at is what you pay attention to and you start to react to. If you just keep all these numbers buried, nobody pays attention. Because one of the things, the report came out, and we all knew that the suspension rates for African American males was going to be higher. Nobody needed to tell us that, but now we have a report that says, no, here it is. Now, all of a sudden, it's getting lots of attention. Well, we knew it all along. So don't just have the report. It's one. And then in a couple of months, oh, we're not paying attention to it anymore. We've moved on to the next thing. We have to make it a standing item. And some of those, we really do need to make them a standing item with regards to what we're looking at.
Well, we have a few people back here. Y'all have any questions for her, any comments for her in terms of her candidacy?
How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you.
Walking all over this complex.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
You could at least put size.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's
ridiculous.
So yes, my question is, so if I heard you correctly, white female teachers are responsible for the high suspension rate of primarily black male students, kindergarten to third grade.
Well, I don't want to say that they're primarily responsible. I think
Well,
that
aren't they the majority?
They are the
Can you give us
majority.
a number? I've read 93%. That's about right.
yeah, it's probably close to something like that. Yeah, it's very high, but I don't want to just constantly just blame one group either.
But we know what the problem is. So we know what's the solution. That's what I want to hear from you, Ms. Nunley.
Okay, there's a couple of things. Like I said, one of the things is put it on the agenda so that we're constantly staring at it and we constantly have to deal with it. If we just look at the report and then we don't see it anymore, after a while, what happens? People have a tendency to forget.
But isn't this
That's
true?
one.
But
Okay.
isn't it true these problems didn't just crop up
That's true.
last year? These things are systemic,
Yes.
are they not?
Yes, they are.
And we have no idea of how many of these black boys have gone on to the prison pipeline because of a mistreatment of 93% or more of female white teachers. That's sad.
It is.
Somebody
It's-
saying that in the room. You started asking a question, and Ms. Lydia Pickett said, "Having women over black boys, is that a problem?"
Oh,
She just said women. I get what you're saying,
yeah.
but I do think we're gonna have to kind of look at that. Like I get the thing about of sharing the data, but what's the action after the data? That's what you're asking.
Yeah,
What's
and
the
that's
action?
the
I
other
agree.
thing.
I'm sorry. Yes,
No.
Exactly.
What you think
that's
happens after the data?
that after the data, like I said, having it in front of our face, I think, is one key component. The other component, I think, is doing the professional development or cultural bias training. Really getting people in there. And that training can't just be one time. It's not like, oh, we're going to stop today, do the one-time training, and then let's all go back and we're done. No, it has to be ongoing. And it does need to be universal, okay? Now, I do want to go back to where you said 93% white women and everything else. But I also want to be fair. Because let's say if we were talking about police and police shooting African-American males, a lot of times it's African-American police shooting African-American males too. So it's a systemic problem. It's not just because it's this one person.
I agree.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to I don't want to just say, oh, it's because it's white women. No, we can't say that. It's the system. There's a problem with that system, and there's a problem that we need to disrupt that system and try and figure out other ways of dealing with things. Because a lot of it is fear. And so we may need to train people, don't be fearful. Maybe it's something, and really desensitizing them so that they're not quite so fearful and that there's understanding, as well as providing the other supports like trauma care, because there's a lot of trauma, and there's mental health in our community as well. We all know that.
I have one more question.
No, please.
There are rumors that teachers are going to be allowed to carry firearms into their classroom.
Oh, my Lord.
I know.
That's a good one.
It's already happening in Texas, but we're in the West Coast. We kind of
Wild West.
we're kind of level-headed. But how do you feel about that? And do you support it? Or?
Absolutely not. I do not support that. And to tell you the truth, and this may be a little bit more radical, I'm not even fully in support of having what they call school resource officers on our campuses as well,
Yes.
because that's just making it more of a police state.
Yes, ma'am.
When you have these school resource officers, which is just another way of saying the police are on campus, they have a tendency to just, from their police training, view everybody as a potential suspect or something along those lines. I don't think that we should have those on campuses, because from what I understand, most of the time when they talk about safety, you know, and you go back to Columbine or any of those where it was, we need the resource officers so that we can be, you know, have the kids be safe.
Yeah.
They're not in our communities, but yet when they put the officers, they put the officers in our communities. Columbine was very white and very affluent. And a lot of these other schools where you're seeing a lot of these issues, they're white and they have a tendency to be a little affluent. The FBI profile of an active shooter at a school is white and male, young, isolated, all of those other things. I think when I was reading those reports, because as a school business officer, I was in charge of safety, and I went back and actually read the reports. I read the Columbine report, which was very interesting, because people will do things, and this is one of the areas too. I think we have to do things based on information, the data. Don't do it based on a rumor or hearsay. And people will say, oh, at Columbine, they were watching the closed circuit TVs. No, they weren't. I read the report, they did not. But people will say that and then say we should, you know, have this particular precaution or that particular precaution. So before we go and say, oh, it's this problem and here's how we're going to solve it, we need to look at the research. We need to look at data and make informed decisions, not decisions based on bad information. You know, garbage in, garbage out.
So how can you and the board of the school district make it safe for teachers? Because it could be scary being a teacher too, let's be honest, but also make it safe for our students. And is that possible?
I think that there are steps that we can take to make it better. Okay? And the issue I think that we have to do is let's start taking that first step. And, you know, if you were doing any of the other things, what's the first step? Admitting you got a problem. And that's where making it a standing agenda item, you're admitting, I got a problem. And that's why it doesn't cost anything. Let's make it known we got a problem. And then let's start finding ways to put some action behind it.
So if you're elected, will you then try to work with some of the community members to tell us how we can help you once you're on that board? Because I also think when you put people on positions or boards, we have to back you up. We just don't get you there and then go on and play hopscotch or something and go have dinner or something. Would you be able to do that?
Absolutely. That would be one of the things. It's critical as a board member, get out in your community. Get out, find out what's going on. Get out there. And, you know, what are the issues? What are the concerns? What's coming up? What are people talking about? So I think that is so critical. And always, another group also asked me with charter schools, it's like, would you be willing to meet with us? Well, absolutely, because why have a closed door? No, I need to hear, I need to know, because what we know right now is not the end all or be all. There's going to be more information. We learn more. And as we learn more, we need to do more, and maybe learning more means that there's more problems.
How do people get in touch with you?
Okay, how they can get in touch with
I posted your Facebook page.
Oh, thank you.
But I know if there was something else.
The other thing is I also have a website, www.cecilenunley.com. And that is CECILENUNLEY.com.
Okay, I posted that too.
I have a question.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I know you have done work in the past around bail reform and looking at different legislations that have been passed. I particularly want to ask you about Prop 47. There was money is supposed to be allocated to go to schools, trauma centers, mental health, rehab, and all these different things. What is your understanding of what Sacramento is doing to utilize those fundings?
Sacramento in general, not just the school district, I think you're talking about.
Well, Sacramento, the city of Sacramento, the city of
Sacramento. As I understand it right now, and I would have to delve a little bit more into that just to be fair, there still are some challenges. They're still trying to figure out how to allocate a lot of that money. But I think because I was working with Kelly Todd and Sister, like we were talking about, no, we need to release some of this money so that we can start utilizing it. Because there's a lot of trauma, as you well know, in our communities that we need this help. We need a lot of help, so.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue because we know from meetings previously with like Cerna and a couple other elected officials that they sent money back, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make sure that we get that money for the things that we need? Like,
I think that's just like what
What prop
Rolanda
number
was
is that
saying.
again?
Prop 47.
Go ahead, sorry.
That's just like what Rolanda was saying. What I would hope is that you guys hold me accountable when I'm in the seat and that you find a way. Because one of the things that I did, as you well know, and Kelly was doing as well, was we were trying to meet with Cerna. We were trying to meet with these elected officials to ask the question. Because if we don't get in there and start asking the questions, then things get ignored and sent back and nobody knows. Again, we have to stay informed.
So how are we going to work together to do that? Because you're going to be in, and we're going to be out.
No, that's real talk.
So
some
then-
of your strategies to think about like how you can bring community
One of the things that
to
I love,
support you,
right,
But
yeah.
then also to hold you and the others that are on the council.
yeah, one of the things that I like is when you have a relationship, when you're in constant contact. So I like standing meetings. If that means every Saturday or Friday or Thursday or whatever night we can figure it out, then we're having a standing meeting with our groups and that we're talking about those things, what's going on with it. So I like standing meetings, to tell you the truth. I don't want to meet with you just once. I want us to have a standing meeting and we really know each other. Where I could say, hey girl, oh yeah, here we go again. That's what I like.
So what's the date for the vote?
The date is November 6th. And it will be by mail, as everyone knows. So you should be getting your ballots early next week. I want to say November 8th, or excuse me, October 8th, they are mailing them out, which is Monday. So you should be receiving them probably Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay, so voting November the 6th by mail.
Yes.
All right, any closing words before we wrap up?
Just thank you so much for being here, and I hope that everyone, no matter who you vote for, please go out and vote. Please make your voices heard. If you're not registered, please go out and get registered. You have until October 3rd to get registered.
Which is tomorrow. So go out and get registered to vote. Have a good night. Vote for Cecile Nunley for Area 2, Sacramento City Unified School District. Thank you.
Thank
Peace.
you.